Damn you! God damn you all to hell!
Anyway, what were we talking about again? Oh, right, Pathfinder. Quick heads up, I'm not going to go through and explain every little thing, otherwise we'll be here all day, so this video assumes you've at least played Kingmaker, or Wrath of the Righteous, or the tabletop of course, so you have a general idea of how the class systems, stats, and all that jazz works. Like last time, I'll also pin a link to the Steam guide I wrote up that compiles a lot of this information in one place that'll make it easier to reference. What I will cover quickly though is the major stuff you need to know. First of all, melee combat essentially comes down to the age-old question between strength or dex. As you level up, Pathfinder has an underlying stat increase called base attack bonus, or BAB for short, which is a flat modifier to your chance to hit, but there's also a lot more going on behind the scenes than just picking up a sword over a dagger. Something you'll very soon see if you haven't already is that Pathfinder's systems revolve around feats. Any build, whether you're just playing for fun or the hardcore min-max perfectly optimized run on solo unfair difficulty, lives and dies by its feats. The big one when it comes to strength or dex is whether you can justify weapon finesse, assuming it doesn't come with all the base proficiencies of your class, or whether you want to dump all your hit chance and damage into the one stat of strength. Weapon finesse catches a lot of new players out because, remember, it only affects the hit modifier, not damage. For dex to apply to damage, you need either the mythic weapon finesse, which is a big investment that may take up other mythic abilities you might also need, weapon focus and then slashing grace if your class allows it, or training that comes with your class, such as the knife master. There's also the light weapon property, which is very useful if you're dual wielding with the 2 weapon fighting feat, which reduces the hit penalty by 1. Obviously, strength players don't have to worry about any of this, because assuming you have martial weapons proficiency, you can pick up almost anything you want and go all unga bunga on everything in your way. And power attack and either the cleaving finish line of feats or dazzling display and intimidation is what you'll want to focus on. Ranged is a whole other story because bows are separated by the standard and composite type. Composites are what you'll want because there is no dex modifiers added to the base damage of a standard bow, whereas composites add strength. This is huge. In terms of feats, it is absolutely essential to get the precise feat, which negates the -4 penalty on hitting targets in combat, and I'd also recommend you have point blank shot enabled to be within 30 feet at all times too. There's really no reason to be outside that. There's also backgrounds which add modifiers or potentially proficiency if your class doesn't come with it by default already, which can potentially be huge depending on your build. An easy one to always go for is Pickpocket because of the bonus to initiative. Another one is Mandevian Orphan for the bonus to saving throws against demons, or Leader for persuasion and greatsword and longsword. Why this is so good early game is that because if your class already comes with something like martial weapons proficiency, and then you get a background that adds a proficiency on top, it stacks, meaning you get an extra +1 to hit or on a skill check. God damn it. This was supposed to be quick, and already I've started digging into the kind of detail that would fill entire university lectures, but the last thing I want to add before we get to the builds is how spellcasting works. Similar to D&D, you have 2 main spellcasting stats that determine the amount of spell slots you can get each level. Wisdom for more faith-based or holy casters like clerics, druids, etc., and intelligence for the standard mages, witches, or if you're one of those crazy bastards who play alchemist builds. Pathfinder also has charisma for sorcerers, shamans, and blood rages, but there's another layer to it as well with the distinction between spontaneous and memorized spells. Memorized is spellcasting as you know it in D&D and other RPGs. You actually have to set it manually in your spellbook. Spontaneous works as still being given a total amount of spell slots, but you pick from a number of spells at level up, and it doesn't allow you to edit your spellbook in a sense because this is assigned by your deity, for example, like clerics, oracles, and the like. This gets even better with spellbook merges through Mythic Paths later on, but but we won't get into that just yet. Last thing, and not build related per se, I just want to make it clear that I am not a pro at Pathfinder by any means, and I'd be the first to admit it. I'm not a build expert, and I wouldn't call myself super optimal or a min-maxer. Part of the fun of Pathfinder, if it does click for you, is starting to experiment and making your own crazy powerful builds. I'm not joking when I say this game made me a better player and more appreciative of deep RPGs, because it frankly forces you to. Along with the Steam guide, I'll also leave a link to CRPG Bro's channel. This guy has been consistently putting out amazing build guides for years that may inspire you for your next playthrough, or just help you start to get your head around the systems more. He's covered Wrath, Rogue Trader, and heaps of other games too. I've often taken some of his suggestions and tweaked them for my own, like The Lich, so he's well worth checking out. He knows his stuff more than I could ever really cover here. Finally, for real this time, in this video I'm going to be covering some of the fun builds I've used over the years. Some of these lean more towards power and min-maxing, while others are themed and not necessarily optimal. This is just for fun, and I can't imagine this will get much attention, but who cares? Oh, also, before I forget, these are all designed for core difficulty, which is what I play on. You'll have even more fun on lower difficulties because of the reduced damage or DC, but while Angel shouldn't change, some of these might not be as viable on the ball-breaking difficulties of Unfair, for example. Take that for what it's worth. If you have anything you want to share, suggestions, or want to post builds of your own, go for it. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into it. We'll start off with the one I used in that video recently, since a bunch of people were asking about it. Not only is Angel really strong in terms of story and theming, given the whole crusade premise, it's crazy good against what you'll be fighting for the majority of the game, that being, unsurprisingly, demons and various spawn of the abyss. Like the defender of the true world, or first world, or whatever it was called in Kingmaker, since you were fighting Fae the whole time, the Angel Mythic Path and any kind of holy damage will wipe the floor with your enemies, as you saw with spells like Storm of Justice. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's load up Calliope's max save here, and I'll take you through it in broad strokes. Race-wise, I know humans are really boring to pick when there's other options here, but you can't beat the bonus fees at level 1, plus the extra skill point, which I use to put into the only skills I'll be focusing on with this character. Persuasion for intimidating enemies in combat and occasional dialogue use, and also Law Religion for theme. If you're more of a min-maxer, Motherless Tiefling is crazy good for the extra bite attack and strength and wisdom bonuses, and getting your int down as low as 5 means you can bump up other stats, or should I say ability scores, but you get what I mean. Background, we're using Leader again because for theme and loose reasons, longswords are crazy good, and Iomedae of course plays a huge part in the story. This will be sword and board too for theme once again, but also the benefits of shields for AC, and some great items you'll pick up over the game. This is perfect for the archetypal Divine Crusader we're going for. The starting stats are 18 Strength, 12 Dexterity, 14 Constitution, 7 Intelligence, which remember is balanced out by the extra skill point for humans, 15 Wisdom, and 14 Charisma. Charisma is not super important here. I'm using it for Persuasion and the Dazzling Display, Shattered Defenses line of feats, which we'll cover in a bit, but Wisdom is the main spellcasting stat for Cleric. You want to get it fairly high early on and compensate with headbands, and then later on Mental Perfection to get it up to Wisdom 20. By the endgame, this will unlock all the spells you saw in the main video, including level 10, which is absolutely insane. Like I mentioned earlier, skills are going to be exclusively Persuasion and Law Religion. Nature too, if you want, because of the resistance to tiring, but that's up to you. First feats though are super important. Clerics are a class that spec into their deity's associated weapon. Like I said, Iomedae is perfect for this character we're going for, and because longswords consistently mean amazing loot like the Black Dragon's Fang from Wilsagams or Blood Boiler from the Skeletal Salesman will carry you for most of the game. We're going to be a bit tricky here with the feats because one of them relies on weapon focus, so first select something as a throwaway and the same goes to the bonus. We first need to jump forward to yet another feat we get as a bonus because of our Cleric's domain. So first select Diomede for Deity, channel positive energy, which is always useful even though you'll have Dyron or another healer most of the time, then make sure it's the War domain. This finally gives us access to Weapon Focus Longsword, which means we can now jump back to the first two feats and pick up what we wanted to since we've filled the requirements. Power Attack, which gives extra damage, but more importantly, Dazzling Display. This is an activated ability that I don't ever use, but it's a prerequisite to the ones we'll be using later on, so it's good to pick up now. Finally, to wrap up character creation, lawful good or neutral, whatever you want, appearance and voice, and then voila. We'll be here all day if I go into the kind of detail for every level, so let's jump forward a bit to what you'll be going for over the rest of the game. Level 2 and onwards, we're just putting it into law, religion, and persuasion like I said, so I won't be commenting on that each time. Level 3, we get to pick our next feat, which because this is a strength-based melee class, let's pick up Intimidating Prowess, which is going to be very useful because it adds our strength modifier to intimidation checks. Level 4, we get our next and first of 5 total stat increases. What we want to do is get wisdom up to 16 here, and then use items to get it up to 20 like I said earlier for the rest of the game. From this point on though, we're just going to be dumping each one into strength. Get that sucker as high as possible, more likely to hit, more damage equals more dead demons. Level 5, Blind Fight, which is very useful, especially later on in the game with enemies that use gaze attacks. Bonus feat I pick up here is Heavy Armor Proficiency, which you should only be using from here on out. Once you get to the Siege of Dresden, you'll get Staunton's Armor, which is easily one of, if not the, best sets in the game, and will carry you to the end credits. Level 6 is just skill points again. 7, Cornigan Smash is our next feat, and this is where all that talk about intimidation is finally coming together. The Dazzling Display feat from earlier will now happen automatically. That's what you were seeing with the burst of dark gold particles each time an enemy falls. Making your enemy shaken or even flee will give you bonuses to attack or even attacks of opportunity if they move away. This is perfect for the kind of character we're going for here. A Divine Avenger of Iomedae, wielding the Sword of Justice at the head of the Crusade and scaring the shit out of the Demon Scourge. Level 8, just a strength increase. Level 9, Shattered Defenses. This applies the flat-footed status, which reduces dexterity bonuses to your target. Think of it as kind of like an advantage from surprise attacks, which is, again, a huge deal. Level 10, we want Weapon Specialization Longsword. This is a no-brainer at this point. We're focusing exclusively on our patron's weapon of choice. Level 11, Improved Critical for Longsword. Level 12, another strength increase. This will bring the base to 20, and with buffs, you're looking at over 30 now by the mid-game. Level 13, Spell Penetration. It's not super useful yet, but once we get higher level spells, this is going to be great against demons. Level 14, just more skill points. Level 15, Dreadful Carnage, and the bonus feat is Greater Weapon Focus Longsword. Level 16, another strength increase. Level 17, Greater Spell Penetration, which by now you're wiping the floor with the Wrath of the Righteous or Storm of Justice, so long as you have gear that gets your wisdom to 20. Level 18, not much to say, just skill points again. Level 19, you can pick whatever you want by this point, since you're practically unstoppable. I went with Hammer the Gap, but anything melee related really. Finally, level 20. I chose Shield Focus for the extra bit of AC, but like I said, you're practically a god already. Now, all that would be fine and well, but of course, what would the commander be without the wings of angels to match? The base class is strong enough as it is, but this is where the build ascends to the kind of power that will have the Abyss shaking in their boots. Even better, you get full spell casting up to level 10, and because Cleric merges with the Angel spellbook, you'll truly be a force to be reckoned with. Anyway, starting off, it's not super important what you go with here. I chose Close to the Heavens for the obvious theme reasons. I never use any of these abilities per se, but the base elemental resistance is pretty good. Dance Macabre is also very strong because it gives you negative energy immunity, including level drain, which is very useful for pretty much any playthrough, whether you're going for Lich or not. Anyway, in terms of what ability you can select, you have two paths here. If you're not really big on spell casting, Thundering Blows, Divine Strike, and the one we'll get to later, the crazy good Last Stand, are solid picks. I went with Abundant Casting because we're boosting spell slots now, which will only work before the merge since it doesn't affect mythic spellbooks. Same thing at level 2. You also get hard to kill here, which is very useful to reduce death on higher difficulties. At level 3, we're finally choosing the angel path for real now, and this is where it starts to get really good. The bread and butter of this character is Sword of Heaven, which will apply holy damage to our longsword that stacks on top of all the other damage or enchantments. In addition, this is where the spellbook merge happens. It is still a bit early before we start getting access to the best spells, but you'll start seeing new ones with a fancy border in your spellbook that come from the Angel Mythic. For the ability, I chose Leading Strike for theme and the extra divine damage, but it's not super important here. Finally, we also get our Angelic Halo, which will have its own little neat progression path, buff your allies, and even damage demons later on, which is really nice. Next up, let's increase the Sword of Heaven with Everlasting Flame. I get Destructive Shockwave here too, because it will go well with Thundering Blows if you have that already, since it applies your strength modifier to missed attacks. Any damage you can do is good damage, but you're already going to be an insane holy powerhouse as it is. Level 5, Burning Bright for damage to demons, and finally, Last Stand, which is arguably the best ability in the game since it will keep you alive at 1 HP for a whole turn, even as Balors wail on you. Level 6, Grand Blessing to buff the already crazy good holy damage we're getting from the Sword of Heaven. The perk we want for greater damage with our longsword is naturally Improved Critical Longsword. Next up, we want Solar Winds as the next ability for our Halo. The ability is not super important at this point. I'd go for Thundering Blows for the sonic damage if you haven't already got it, or Greater Abundant Casting if you're more into the spell side of things, but remember this won't give us extra slots based on the angel spells, just more of our base cleric spells. Level 8, you're truly godly at this stage, and this is where we get access to my favourite of the angel abilities, Speed of Light for the Sword of Heaven. Applying it to our weapon, and because it lasts for much longer now too, means we're basically always under the effects of haste. Extra attack, increased movement speed, crazy damage. The Abyss might as well just surrender now. Level 9, Flame of Life is nice for our Halo, but really, whatever you want by this point. Finally, Overwhelming Flames for Sword of Heaven, Weapon Specialization Mythic for our Longsword, and finally, Sword of Holy Healing ties out the Angel Mythic path. You are so strong, Iomedae herself is offering for you to become the new commander of Heaven's armies. This is what I was talking about with the power curve in Wrath, which is unlike anything else. I'll quickly run through spells too, but a lot of this is up to you. In terms of angel picks, Wrath of the Righteous and Storm of Justice are insanely good to vaporize everything on screen, and by the final push to Threshold, you'll have access to Phoenix Gift and Army of Heaven, which means you're practically stronger than anything on the mortal plane. Archon's Aura is useful early game, same with Shield from Demonkind. Cleansing Flames and Righteous Might are pretty good until we get to the endgame stuff too. Once we get to level 6 onwards though, this is where spells are insanely good. Ward Against Harm Communal, which will protect you against basically everything, Sunmarked, and then, of course, Fortress of the Faithful for everyone to get displacement and the like for the whole party. Healer's also good to have on hand for 1 or 2 casts, just in case you need it. I keep coming back to this build because it's just so goddamn satisfying to play. The power curve here is godly. It fits perfectly with the theme, and you're going to be unstoppable. Great stuff. Oh man, this was meant to be a smaller side project for fun, but considering how long the first build took, this video is going to be 100 hours long, isn't it? Anyway, come this far, right? The next build I'll cover is the mercenary specific one I mentioned in that video as well. A Knife Master that will be your perfect all-rounder for crazy damage with sneak attack kukris, plus trickery, stealth, and use magic device too if you need it. I go with a Plumeketh Aasimar, but really any race is useful here that you can get a plus to dex. Human, elf, tiefling, even Dampier if you want to get creative with it. Background isn't super important because kukris are niche, so let's go with Pickpocket for the initiative and trickery bonus. Stat-wise, the only thing we're really focusing on here is dexterity. One thing to note is that this build doesn't start to come together until level 3, so so you will have a rough time during that first dungeon if you're playing this on your main character, because you haven't got dexterity to apply to damage rolls yet. At least you have sneak attack bonuses. As soon as you get to the tavern and High Law, I make a beeline to recruit the mercenary, but the latest playthrough, I tried this on a main character and it is a bit of a slog. Anyway, jumping back to stats, strength 10 since we don't want to go into the negatives, 20 dexterity, 14 constitution, 8 intelligence since we're going to cover everything anyway, 12 wisdom for a bit of the will saving throw bonus, and charisma 10. If your race has been given some more leeway, charisma is useful to bump up a bit for use magic device, but it's up to you. In terms of skills, it's going to be the same the whole game, just like last time. The bread and butter of rogue classes, mobility, trickery and stealth, perception for detecting traps and illusions, and then finally use magic device for scrolls or wands like haste, which are very, very powerful early to mid game. The order of feats here isn't super important since we're going for a mercenary companion, and you'll have kukri training by the time you're recruiting them with High Law at level 3, but let's start with martial weapons proficiency since we need that for the kukris. Daisy and alignments, whatever you want. If you are playing this on your main character, you should pick something based on the mythic path you're going for. This is a great all-rounder for any playthrough really, but I'd say Trickster, Eon or Azata are probably best. Since this is a merc, I just make them neutral, so smite spells and alignment specific stuff like Chaos Hammer doesn't affect them. Appearance, voice, and that's level 1 done. Quick tangent about gear, but Lady Calandra's shirt is light mithril armor which you can find beneath the Tower of Eastrod early game, plus the kukri Grace of Peace, which are really good for the first big chunk of your playthrough. I should have explained this already, but you might be wondering, why kukris? They're a light weapon, so it reduces the penalty for dual wielding. The crit range is a roll between 18 to 20, which is insanely good, and the multiplier itself is times 3, and will only get better with ways to increase it later on. If that wasn't enough, you also get the best kukri in the game behind a hidden wall in a Rilu's laboratory in Act 3 that even does elemental damage too. In short, kukris are already amazing on their own, but pair them with full sneak attack damage and it's disgustingly powerful. Now, if this build wasn't already crazy good as it is with full sneak attack 10, we also get access to talent similar to Slayer's every second level, meaning you're getting something useful basically every level up, at least a sneak attack increase if not another feat. There is no wasted time or just a skill dump here. For level 2, we want the 2-weapon fighting feat for either daggers or another light weapon while you're going through the first dungeon as your main character, or for the double kukri's insane crit range and damage potential. Level 3, we finally get access to finesse training with the kukri. Dex now applies to damage rolls and you're going to be unstoppable. Let's get weapon focus kukri to negate the dual wielding penalty with light weapons down to only a -1 now, rather than the base -4. I told you this would be good. Level 4, double slice to make sure we're doing full damage with the offhand weapon as well. Debilitating strike is good for knocking down some AC. Level 5, combat reflexes for the additional attacks of opportunity based on our dex. Level 6, outflank. Teamwork feats are easy to sleep on, but outflank is so good, you should have it on basically every party member in the game. It's so powerful for the attack bonus and provoking attacks of opportunities, which as you might have seen already, means a whole party of your characters flanking a boss enemy is just bullying them at this point with the amount of attacks per round. Level 7, sneak attack and skills again. I picked up dodge for the extra AC, but you could go for something like blind fight instead. Level 8, let's get improved 2-weapon fighting, which gives us an extra attack. Improved uncanny dodge also comes with the nice bonus, meaning we can't be flanked, and improves evasion too. Level 9, hammer the gap. Level 10, we're getting really crazy now with the amount of attacks per turn by getting the opportunist talent. We've also unlocked the even better advanced talents now too. Level 11, I almost feel bad for anyone in your way with the improved critical kukri feat. We also get another finesse training option here, but it's pointless. Dagger if you really want to, but you're not going to be using any other weapons. Level 12, the crippling strike talent for the strength damage is a good choice. Any way we can reduce enemies' damage and power is good. Level 13, since I'm playing with an Aasimar, wings is an easy choice for the AC bonus as much as Slim. If you're using a different race, go with whatever, it's not super important. Level 14, Hunter's Surprise, means you can eviscerate anything by applying your sneak attack bonus, even if if it doesn't qualify, to every single attack that turn. I told you this would get crazy. Level 15, greater 2 weapon fighting, so we can keep hitting enemies so hard their ancestors feel us. Level 16, the double debilitation talent is very useful to pick up, meaning we can stack crippling strike with other choices like dispelling attack to remove spells or buffs. Level 17, blind fight here, but really, this is just the victory lap, so you can pick whatever. Level 18, dispelling attack like we just talked about. Level 19, piranha strike, but you definitely don't need any extra damage at this point of the game. You're jibbing anyone in your way, and one good crit is making the toughest enemies explode, so you can defeat anyone with your eyes shut. Speaking of which, another finesse training option, pick whatever since it won't mean anything. I went with unarmed. Level 20 to finally tie out this build. It's ugly how good those damage numbers are. Jump up is situational, but useful just in case. If you're not already convinced, try this build out for yourself and you'll soon see why I keep coming back to this merc companion every single playthrough. Those damage numbers are enough to give the Abyss pause. We get feats and talents basically every level, full sneak attack progression, Kukri's insane crit range and damage. I almost feel bad for anyone in your way. Next up, we have another one of my favourite builds and playthroughs which I touched on in the video. This is the Tiefling Monk turned Gold Dragon, which is insanely good by the endgame, especially since the Gold Dragon Mythic Path was overhauled a while back. This is great for min-maxers as much as theme, because the visuals alone look so fucking cool. I kept taking screenshots in the inventory screen because of how badass you look, especially as a Tiefling. Gold Dragon synergizes with a lot of classes, such as Cleric from earlier, but this time I'm going with another one of my favorites, Monk. You'll hear some people complain that it's kind of stupid that you can get higher AC wearing nothing at all compared to an armor or shield, but this is part of the trade-off. Sword Saint was the dead horse everyone got tired of hearing in every single build as far back as Kingmaker, but this time we're going with something a little different. Traditional Monk. Part of what makes Monks so good is that you don't just get the standard AC bonus from Dexterity, but Wisdom as well. It's worth noting you can either get the Weapon Finesse Mythic ability later on, or use the Amulet of Agile Fists if you want to go exclusively into Dex for attack and damage, but Mighty Fists is way better, and Strength is easier to boost. For this reason, we're going with the Motherless Tiefling. Very bold and unique of me, I know, because Intelligence is useless here, and we get the extra bite attack since we're already fighting up close. Background is whatever. You could go with the bog standard Pickpocket for Initiative or Mendev Orphan for the saving throw bonus. It's not important. Stats will start with 18 Strength, 16 Dexterity, 13 Constitution, 5 Intelligence, 18 Wisdom, and poor old Charisma ends up as the dump stat yet again at 7. Skill points are basically useless to this build. I spread them out over Mobility, Athletics, and Perception, but you can do whatever. This character isn't focused on utility. For the face, we want Weapon Focus, Unarmed Strike for obvious reasons, and Dodge as the bonus for that little extra AC. With the braces from Aurilu, by the starting dungeon, you're already going to be over 20 AC without any armor whatsoever, which should give you an idea of just how good this is going to get. Appearance, if you want to get this look. If you're wondering, the extra paints and cosmetics come with the free DLC you can get off the Steam page. Not really sure why Owlcat didn't just roll this into an update. Alignment is whatever, just make sure it's some variation of lawful, and then we're done. From here on, once we get Constitution up a little bit, we're just putting all the ability scores into Strength for more damage, better hit chance, and more enemies that we can punch until they explode in a shower of gore. Level 2, Blind Fight, because the more likely we are to hit is great, plus the immunity to gaze attacks. Next, we get our first movement speed increase, so you'll be zipping around the map and wiping the floor with everyone in your way. For the face, let's get Deflect Arrows, which is pretty useful for monks, especially early game with the amount of archers. Level 4, Constitution increase. The rest are just class specific unlocks. Level 5, Outflank again, because this is easily one of the best feats in the game. Because we're playing strength, let's use the hammer blow ability for attacks. Level 6, combat reflexes to give us extra attacks of opportunity. I won't be touching on the key powers because a lot of it's just fluff, but wholeness of body is somewhat useful. Level 7, hammer the gap because of the amount of attacks we're getting with unarmed strikes. Level 8, abundant step, I guess, but you can get whatever you want. A lot of this stuff is very, very situational, and you probably won't use it at all. Next, our old friend improved critical again to improve our punches even more. Level 10, we get diamond body, which is pretty great for stat affecting poisons. Chances are your fortitude rolls are high enough to resist it before this point anyway, but still, it's a pretty nice unlock. Improved blind fight as the bonus feat. Level 11, I picked precise strike, which has the prerequisite of combat reflexes. This pairs nicely if you have another dex character in your party like the knife master from earlier, but feel free to choose something else if you want. Level 12, diamond soul gives some spell resistance, which is nice, but that won't mean much on higher difficulties. Level 13, perfect strike and then shattering punch can be pretty useful for breaking through damage reduction on harder enemies. Level 14, improved initiative is nice as our bonus so we can attack earlier and faster. Level 15, you can go for whatever by this point. I picked spell penetration for the angel and later gold dragon spells to overcome DC. Finally, at level 16, we get arguably the best ability for this class, which is adamantine attacks, so your unarmed strikes will beat any damage resistance. Monks aren't just great in AC, your punches are just as good too. Quick aside, it's been about 2 years since I played this, so forgive me if I can't remember all the details, but I seem to have specced into a Blood Rager from here using the Gold Dragon bloodline, mostly for theme in the remaining 4 levels. Rage is pretty useful since your AC is already so high to negate the loss. Before we get into the mythic stuff, let's briefly talk about gear. For lawful evil players, you can get a great robe from the flesh markets in Alishanera, the red one which I can't remember the name of, whereas good aligned monks can get one from the storyteller from memory. There's also the robe of the Overmind, which you can get from Wurlong Black Mask before or after you kill him, I'm pretty sure, which you can see here comes with a bunch of really good bonuses. Just because you miss out on armor doesn't mean you can't compensate with braces, necklaces, cloaks, rings, plus alone scrolls or potions of mage armor and the like. By the end, you're going to be so strong and AC is insane. You can see it's 70 here in dragon form. About Mythic Paths though, because Gold Dragon is a very late game option only available after the Abyss and the conversation with Aasimar, it's not that important what you go for initially. I went with Angel for how good it is against demons early on, plus the theme and general good alignment for this character, but you could just as easily go for Azata to pick up Ivu, Aeon since monks are already lawful, Trickster if you really want to break things by getting snake attacks, whatever you want really. At level 1, I picked up Dance Macabre solely for the level drain immunity that I mentioned earlier. Death Ward, other than scrolls, you won't have access to for a good chunk of the game, but because your monk is right there in the thick of it already, they can draw aggro from specters and the like, while the rest of your party wails on them. Let's pick up Thundering Blows as our ability for the extra sonic damage even when we miss. Level 2, Destructive Shockwave, because your punches are so good, you might as well be breaking the air at this point too. Level 3, Unrelenting Assault for stacking increases to damage as we land one punch after another. This is where our initial mythic path is locked in, but because all that was lost when changing to Gold Dragon, I'll skip over that from here. Level 4, Improved Unarmed Strike Mythic. Level 5, Leading Strike for the extra divine damage as you weave punches together one after another. Level 6, Dodge Mythic for the extra AC is nice, but you can go with something else if you really want to. Level 7, Last Stand is a no-brainer here. We're going to be unstoppable and powerful, so we don't even need to worry about lethal damage at this point. Alright, quick tangent before we get into the details of level 8, but unfortunately Gold Dragon takes a long time after you initially choose it on returning from the Abyss. Unfortunately, just like Legend, it's not just a case of then and there, you have to follow up with Hal, who then gives you the runaround before you finally get the Gold Dragon form proper. Still, it is worth it, even though you get much less screen time when compared to the others, but for power reasons, it's worth a headache to fully unlock. Also, I've just remembered that I completely forgot to cover how you unlock the Gold Dragon path, which would be helpful, wouldn't it? Unlike Angel and Demon, which are impossible to miss in the story, there are some hoops you have to jump through to get it. First, you need to have at least one of Tyrandalev's scales spare by the time you rescue the storyteller from the Black Library in Canabris. Once you return to the tavern, ask him to examine it, and you'll get a quest to find something else of Tyrandalev's, the silver dragon that Discari absolutely destroys in the opening. During the push towards Dresden in Act 2, after you beat that hive queen thing at Leper's Smile, go down into the caverns beneath it, and in the crates near where you get Zacharias' wand for the Lich Path, you'll pick up Tyrandalev's claw. Note that it doesn't matter whether you try and save the merchants beforehand or just make a beeline to the queen and let them die. It'll still be here regardless, so don't stress. Next time you see the storyteller, whether it's after the tower with Devara or skipping Greyboar, and he'll show up after the Ivory Sanctum, get him to expect the claw, and you'll get a quest to investigate some ruins with cultists. Head out there, and the Gold Dragon and mentor to Tyrandalev will show up and ask you to spare one of the cultists. You have to spare him to get the Mythic Path, otherwise you're locked out. Finally, once you get back to Dresden and there's the confrontation between Iomedae and Nocticula, you'll unlock it as the endgame path. Anyway, life story aside, for level 8, we get all our Gold Dragon abilities and bonuses. Let's pick up improved critical mythic for Unarmed Strike too. Level 9, there's tons of options you get as your draconic power grows, meaning you have access to any feat in the game, even without the requirements. As you can see, I picked improved cleaving finish so you can punch your way through entire hordes, Archmage armor for even more AC, greater penetrating strike for unarmed attacks, and dreadful carnage, but the last one can be whatever you like. Level 10, power attack mythic. That's it. You have ascended to a true dragon, and the demons will be shitting themselves, whether you're in mortal form or not. God damn, this video is way longer than I'd planned, but anyway, the last big one I want to cover is going to be the Demonslayer build I mentioned I spec Sealer into. This will use Sealer for the footage, even though her stats aren't that great, but if you want to have an idea of how to start off the character, I'll take you through the one I used from the start in the latest playthrough I mentioned earlier with my Knife Master main character. Big surprise, Motherless Tiefling again for the Wisdom and Strength bonuses, plus the Bite attack. Tieflings are always an easy go-to for min-maxes because of the amount of builds that can just use Charisma or Int as a dumb stat. Anyway, stat-wise, we're starting with 19 Strength, 12 Dexterity because we'll be using heavy armor, 14 Constitution, 5 Intelligence, 14 Wisdom, and 12 Charisma. Skills aren't important to this build. I'll be putting points exclusively into Law, Nature, and Perception. Our starting piece is Weapon Focus Longsword, which will stack in addition to our class proficiency and the later background, which is going to come in handy early on. Alignment doesn't matter, like I said before, if this is a companion, but choose something if you're using it on your main character based on the Mythic Path. Appearance, voice, and voila. Let's get into the rest. One benefit of using this on a mercenary from the start, or respecking other companions if you're playing on lower difficulties, since that's not an option on core, means you'll have an animal companion sooner than Sealer, and, more importantly, the boon companion feat that will bring it up to current level. Anyway, level 2, since we're using Sealer here, is Cleave to start the cleaving finish line of feats. Depending on your party composition, you really shouldn't have more than one person spec'd into the Charisma, Dazzling Display, Intimidation style, which we already covered with the Crusader Angel, because it's just redundant. This is the alternative that will mean we can keep carving into enemies after each one falls. Level 3, we want Urban as our favoured terrain, since you'll be fighting in Canabris and Dresden early on. Weapon Focus Longsword for the feat. I give Sealer Blood Boiler, while I main Black Dragon's Fang for most of the game, and the two of you wreck house. Level 4 is the big moment where we finally get access to our animal companion. Don't stress about this too much. Min-maxers will tell you to go with a particular animals, but feel free to go with whatever animal you want. For this build, I love the dogs because of their Trip and Bite attack. Trip is so good, I'm surprised Owlcat hasn't tried to nerf or balance it out some way, because you can make enemies, even giant Valor, fall to the ground and wail on them. The subclass I use is Aggressor because of the extra bleed you get with attacks. Any damage is good damage after all. I won't cover the rest from here. I recommend focusing exclusively on mobility and athletics for the dog, which will make him your mainstay. It also looks pretty funny as the dog of all things does your party's skill checks. Besides that, you want to pick up light barding armor proficiency as soon as possible, then medium armor. I wouldn't bother with heavy because the very few options for that come very late in the game. The rest, just focus on weapon focus and criticals around the bite attack, and put the first ability increase into intelligence so you can get it up to 3 and give him the outflank feat too. Back to the main class though, we get our first big increase in favored enemy for all 3 demon subtypes automatically. This is what makes the subclass so amazing because you'll be fighting against almost exclusively demons the whole game. For the feat, we will pick up Great Cleave. Level 6, Cleaving Finish. Level 7, you want Boon Companion to bring our faithful fluffy boy up to current level. Level 8, we're going to start preparing for Alishanira now, so favored terrain should be Abyss. Level 9, Outflank of course. Level 10, Critical Focus, but you can go for something else if you want. Pairing it with the Cleaving Finish line means we're carving through whole groups of enemies and doing great damage at the same time. Level 11, let's get the improved Critical Longsword feat again. As for level 12, not much here, just a ranger ability. Level 13, Staggering Critical is insanely good. This can even prompt attacks of opportunities depending on the enemy, so it's a no-brainer for our feats. Level 14, Power Attack to boost our damage a bit more, or improved Cleaving Finish if you want it. Level 15, Blind Fight, because we're going to be fighting a lot of enemies with gaze attacks from this point onwards. Level 16, nothing unfortunately, just skill points and BAB. Level 17, Improved Cleaving Finish means you can attack any number of times per round now. Yeah, that's just as insanely powerful as it sounds. Level 18, by this point it's kind of whatever, I just picked the Toughness feat for some extra HP. Level 19, Improved Blind Fight, which will help us against enemies using Total Concealment, but that's basically it. If it wasn't already clear that you could just sit back and put your feet up while your dog trips and mauls everyone in your way, you can carve through the horde of demons like a total badass. This is a great build, and a mainstay in pretty much every playthrough. The Mythic Path isn't really that important for this character. If you want to go crazy with the animal companions, I could definitely see Azata's to have your dog and Ivu along for the ride, but Aeon, Angel, or hell, even Demon for the irony are just as viable. Remember, this is not a spellcasting class, and the few spells available are just there as nice to haves. Sense Vitals is the best one since you get sneak attack damage for its duration, which is just filthy at this point. Last one we're going to cover isn't a build per se, because it was only a starting point before I got sidetracked with my new playthrough, but it's one for you Lich fans out there, and power gaming too. Before we get to that though, did you know that reading books you pick up with that little golden halo around them gives you bonuses? Nearly 1,000 hours, and I just discovered that for this video. I always wondered what that "you learned something from this book" meant in the combat log. I thought it was for quest dialogue or something. All you need to do is right click in your inventory and examine it to get the bonus. There you go. The more you know, right? Anyway, this one is both themed and perfect for min-maxes, which came from this Aasimar portrait in the pack. I've just copied this stuff from one computer to the next, but wherever I got all of these from initially, I don't think the pack is available anymore unfortunately because of a copyright claim. Now to the build. What we're going to be making is a sorcerer turned dragon disciple Aasimar Lich. For starters, we want the Angelkin for the strength and charisma bonuses, our 2 main melee and spellcasting stats, plus charisma will play a role for our Lich in supplementing our health much later on. You also get a free restoration lesser spell, which is pretty handy. For background, we're going for something a little different this time, Farmhand. First, because of the athletics bonus, since we won't be wearing any armor, but more importantly, because we get access to the crux of this class, weapon proficiency with the Scythe. Scythes are slept on in Wrath because not only are they perfect for the fallen angel turned lich theme we're going for here, but the crit multiplier is ×4, the highest of any in the game. Yes, it does come with the trade-off of only rolling on 20s when compared to 18 to 20 on a kukri or scimitar, but you'll see it's really not that bad when you're getting over 100 on a damage roll just in the starting dungeon. For stats, 19 strength, 14 dexterity to get our AC up before the spells do the rest, list, 14 Constitution, 10 Intelligence, 10 Wisdom since we already get a class bonus to Will anyway, and finally 16 Charisma. You can get a headband behind the lever puzzle beneath the starting tavern in Canabris, which will boost us to 18 already. Skills, and this is super important to remember now, is Knowledge Arcana. We have to put 5 ranks into that to unlock the Dragon Disciple Prestige class later on. The modifier itself doesn't matter, only the 5 ranks we put into it. Other than that, feel free to dump the points into whatever. I did Persuasion since we'll be using the Dazzling Display line of feats again, which is perfect for the kind of Reaper that'll be scaring the shit out of enemies. Plus, use Magic Device since we're already a base sorcerer. For the feat, Power Attack, ignore that it's thumbs down, the game just assumes that because we're a dedicated spellcaster. And for our bonus feat, we want Spell Penetration to compensate for the higher DCs I'm assuming on core difficulty here. Deity is super important for theme and to tie into our weapon, so pick Urgathoa, the patron of the undead, and alignment as neutral evil. For our bloodline, we of course want to go for undead. This gives us negative energy plus a lot of lich theme spells for free, since you won't fully achieve lich status until very late in the game like Gold Dragon. An important thing to note here is that for your first mythic ability, you want to choose the extra bloodline and whatever dragon of your choice. I went with Black Dragon for theme. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I could have sworn this used to be possible to unlock with any bloodline, and maybe Owlcat just patched it later on, but we require a draconic bloodline to be able to unlock Dragon Disciple as soon as possible by level 6. You can see using this build on a mercenary in my recent playthrough how good some of the perks of Dragon Disciple are. +4 extra strength, +3 extra natural AC. What makes this build legitimately OP, even though I'm just giving you the setup at this point, is that not only do we get the incredible AC and strength increases through Dragon Disciple, we also get a full spellbook merge with the Lich Mythic Path thanks to Sorcerer. This means you get the same full spells as our Cleric Crusade Angel did earlier, which is insanely good. And there you were thinking this game was favouring good aligned players. From there, you want to focus on a lot of the feats we've already covered. Dazzling Display, Shattered Defenses, Dreadful Carnage, etc., and all the weapon specific stuff for the Scythe. The Mage Armor mythic ability will increase your AC, which is very useful. You're genuinely going to be unstoppable by the time you get access to the insane potential of a Sorcerer Lich merged spellbook. Anyway, I could keep going on and on with the amount of builds and mythic synergies in this game. An Estok Sword Saint Elf with that amazing Crippling Kiss weapon you can find early on at Green Gates. The Blood Ranger Steel Blood turned Dragon Disciple for crazy strength to tear apart anyone in your way. I wasn't kidding when this game has the kind of depth and replay value that will keep you going for years. Some of this could also translate over into Kingmaker, although your mileage will vary, and of course, you don't get any of the mythic path progression either. Like I said at the beginning, none of these are probably super optimal, but that's also part of the fun. If you're messing around on custom or story difficulty, that can be just as good as perfectly optimized min-max Gish builds on unfair difficulty. And if you've never played Pathfinder yourself, maybe this has given you some new appreciation to jump in and try it for yourself. Go wild, whether it's an OC you have in mind or just a general theme, and most importantly, have fun.